everybody, welcome back to another edition of Modern Day Apocrypha, the fun show where Nick and I look for interesting topics that we know nothing about and fumble our way through them, and you get to listen along.
Absolutely nailed it. So if anybody else wants to fumble with us, hang on for the ride. It's going to be a fun one.
What are we talking about today, Nick?
Today we're talking about food and health and just kind of diet in general, what people eat, why people restrict what they eat, and things like that. And there's really a lot to digest here, and I'm excited to
see
dive
what you
in.
did there.
Ba-doom-tsh.
Making me hungry. Throw me back to those beginning podcasts that we did where you'd talk about food and we'd derail for 15 minutes because I'd get hungry and start thinking about food. And good old days.
Absolutely some good days. So, yeah, I guess we can just start where it kind of captured our interest to even talk about this to begin with. And that is, there's so much controversy, so many different opinions. It's so hard to know what to believe and what's right for me. Is there a right answer for everybody? Like, there's just so much that goes into diets and what people are eating these days. And I know we were talking before we started recording, and I just couldn't imagine being a nutritionist right now.
No shit.
Where you had to help people figure out what's right for them.
Yeah, like I've used this analogy before in more of like a corporate space where the expectation is to teach everyone to repeat the same behaviors over and over again. And that is doable only to a certain level, because that's the expectation that everyone is exactly the same. And so you can't have everyone follow the exact same process or exact same steps and have it turn out the exact same result. Especially if there's like communication or personality involved, because every person fucks up your equation because they're a different element. And so trying to be that nutritionist right now going, hey, I know here's what's food, and I need you to eat sweet potatoes and some chicken and some broccoli, and then just copy paste for everybody. Well, if it was that easy, nutritionists wouldn't need to exist, but they need to look at that new piece of equation for whoever you are, see what your diet is, see your body type, your metabolism, all these fucking things, and go, come back in a week after you eat that and we'll see if my guess is right.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. It's like, it's just guesswork, and it's almost trial and error.
Yeah.
I want to know who the motherfucker was that made the food pyramid.
Oh, shit. I think I've heard this before. I think it was, what are we, like 2 minutes in and I'm going to like throw out a conspiracy theory? I love it. I think it was the like big food people who were trying to push lots of grains and shit.
Oh, good. So it's all lobbyists.
Yeah. And I can't remember. It's been so long since I've looked at the food pyramid, but if you look at it, I think there was like a big portion on the bottom of different grains, and then a little bit of meat, a little bit of veggies, a little bit of dairy, and then sugars all the way at the top with even less.
Yeah, so the foundation was your carbohydrates. Then the next level were evenly balanced of meat and veggies, and then it was fruits and dairy, and then up at the top they're like, but also make sure you get a fair amount of fucking cookies.
Yeah, because it was part of what you needed, not don't have much of this. The way it was portrayed was you need sugar.
Right.
Which you
do.
But not the processed sugar that is in all of our shit.
And let's be real, if you're getting your dairy and your fruits and your carbohydrates, sugar box is checked.
Right. Well, and you think about, I'm getting my carbs. No, I didn't check my sugar box because I had cereal, and that's carbs. Well, and then I had ice cream to check my dairy box. Well, that was my dairy box. I still get to have sugar later. And then it's like, fuck. Then you put, orange chicken, and I got my meat, but I got my sugar. Like, you can literally put, as Americans, we're notorious for it. We like really sweet shit.
And it shows, baby.
And it shows. Yeah, our obesity is impressive. Like, if there's a gold medal for that, we would win.
Go team.
Yep.
Yeah, and especially down here in good old Tennessee, where everybody likes their mashed potatoes and gravy and fried chicken.
And sweet tea.
Yep. Oh, and I don't even know if it's tea. Like, I think it just rounds up to sugar.
Well, it's like it's darkened, so you have a little bit of the tea in there. You squeeze a little bit of lemon for flavor, and the rest is just it's like one step less or more liquid than like molasses.
Yeah.
It just pours a little easier, goes down a little easier.
That's what it's about. We got the right viscosity down. Yeah. So, it's just interesting to me that this food pyramid was what all the kids were taught as, like, this is the go-to, what you need to survive and to eat. And it was state sponsored.
Yeah.
Like, the U.S. government sanctioned it and was like, this is it. And now that I've gotten older, first of all, I haven't heard jack shit about the food pyramid.
Yep.
Like, that went out the window. I don't know when it went out the window, but...
Well, think about, they always, and I don't know if it's someone sells this idea and they sign off of it and push it, or they really are just that dumb, like, oh, smoking's really good for your health. Doctor certified. Like, have you seen those ads from back in the day? Pregnant mothers should smoke. And now everything on cigarettes is like, don't smoke. It's carcinogen. If you're pregnant or nursing, definitely don't. But 40 years ago, it was recommended to. And so it's the same thing with the food pyramid. And it's like, are we just this dumb, or do we not know? What the fuck is the story there?
Yeah, so if it is the lobbyists, which makes perfect sense if we're being completely honest, then it just goes to show you that the government's not here for your best interest.
No.
Like, we should be educating ourselves to be able to make our own decisions. And, I feel like we keep coming back to that. It just takes so much time to do your own research and all of this for all these different things that you need to do research on. So it would be so nice if you just had that one source, that trustworthy source, like a government or something like that to go to. But
think about how easy it is to monetize the idea of a trustworthy source.
Oh, absolutely. Especially when they're in power of making
I've got this degree
laws.
in this. I've got whatever in over here. You can trust me. Oh, they did all the hard work for me. I can pay them or just take their advice because they've done it. Or they've got a fancy title to sell you shit.
Well, they should have your best interest in mind, because if a population is healthy, and that's what diet's all about, is being healthy, then they have lower costs in other aspects. They have a fitter military. They've got less healthcare costs, and there are a lot of benefits to looking after society. But at the end of the day, if Purdue Chicken is paying me to make that little segment of the food pyramid 30% bigger, yeah, I'll take that.
Well, and then if you look
what's happening.
If you look at healthcare people who probably know, at least at some level, that diet is probably the biggest thing that could change your health and not cost you a lot of money. But if I do that, I'm throwing away my customers.
Good point. Yeah.
And then I've got, big pharma in my back pocket trying to sell me on selling all these drugs. Hey, you know what? I could tell you to eat less donuts and ice cream. Take this pill instead. Because now I get a kickback from this, and you're going to have to come back. Like, it's customer retention. And I know there's more than that. I know all medical stuff is not just that, but I think that's an aspect that has to be adequately addressed, and let's fucking talk about it, right?
Yeah, certainly. And so we're obviously oversimplifying a lot of this.
Sure.
But a lot of it seems to hold water. So, Tony, you dove in a lot, and I thought it was interesting to read about, I'm going to say diets. And when I say diet, I know that has this connotation of going on a diet, if you will. So, like, I think Atkins, like, that was just like a big one a few years ago, and everybody's like, yeah, I'm on the Atkins diet.
Right.
But diet in general is just like, what foods are you eating? Like, that's your diet. You don't have to be on a diet to have a diet.
It's interesting on how 20, 30, 40 years of culture can change how we look at a word.
Oh, yeah.
Hey,
definitely.
what's your diet? Hey, what do you eat?
And
that's
it. This is a whole nother rabbit hole, but that's why I also think political correctness is kind of interesting, because we move away from one word which was acceptable, and then it kind of becomes taboo, and we replace it with another one, only to be replaced again in 30 years or whatever that time cycle is. And it's like, let's just I know that some words can be bad and they can be mean and have negative connotation, but at the end of the day, like it's the word, it has the definition, and if somebody uses it inappropriately, well then they're just a doucher.
Well, did you watch The History of Swearing on Netflix?
No, that's interesting though.
The first episode, in my opinion, was the best. They take an individual swear word for each one, and the first one was fuck. And they talk about how it's so diverse and be able to use for different things,
beautiful
how
about
it
it
started, and how it has its purpose in the English language, and it's snappy and it grabs your attention in ways that no other words can. And so there's a lot of comedians in there sharing their thoughts on it. But it's interesting on how we take out some of these more powerful, snappy words and say, to be politically correct, you can't say these things. And it's interesting to go like that filter that you were kind of just talking about. I wonder why that is. I know we're getting way the fuck off topic and not even talking about food, but maybe that's something we readdress a different day.
Political correctness. Yeah, interesting. So when I started looking at diets, it kind of dawned on me how many different diets there were. Like, I wrote down a list. You've got vegetarianism. Take that one step further, and you've got veganism. You've got some people are okay with fish. They won't eat poultry or red meats, but they'll eat fish. So that's pescatarianism. Then on the other hand, you've got carnivore diet, paleo, Mediterranean diets. Came across a potato diet. Apparently,
What?
yes, apparently, potatoes have a surprising amount of protein and a well-balanced amino acid group. They've got a lot of carbs.
So do these people just eat potatoes?
Yeah, so one person was like, so can you actually do this? And he ate potatoes for a whole year and lost weight, seemed healthy. I mean, I'm sure he didn't get some micronutrients that you would get from a more well-balanced diet, but he was like, yeah, the worst part was that after about 3 weeks, it's just kind of hard to stomach potatoes, and I've got another 49 weeks to go.
So did he just eat just plain potatoes? Did he put seasonings on them? I mean, maybe
I didn't read that much about
Okay.
it. I just saw that he was kind of more talking about like the health side of it, but I think he only ate potatoes. I'm pretty confident because he was doing it to like see if you could survive off of just potatoes and nothing else.
Idaho.
So yeah, go Idaho. Idaho needs to find this guy and just say thank you.
Oof.
Or Ireland, somebody. Liquid diets. I read about the very first liquid diet was from William the Conqueror, who I think he became king of England. But anyway, this was back in like the 1600s, I believe it was. And he was so fat to mount his horse. I said 1600s. It was 1066. I wrote it down. Way off. But he was so fat.
The numbers were right. They were just rearranged.
Yeah. Thanks for the alley-oop there. So he was so fat that he couldn't get on his horse.
No shit.
And he fell over on his face and embarrassed him. And so like all of this is written down and documented. So he went on an all liquid diet. And what better liquid to go on than alcohol? So
Are you serious?
He went all out on alcohol.
He just drank for how long?
I don't know how long it was. It didn't say.
Oh, that's hilarious.
But so it didn't help him. He didn't lose weight. He ended up dying because I saw there were some mixed thoughts. People laid out two different ways that he died. The one that I'm going to subscribe to just for the comedy aspect of it, sorry, William, was he climbed on his horse, and at the time, the saddles had like a wooden and metal knob, and it hit his stomach and ruptured it so much that he died. He was still so fat that he didn't fit in his coffin, so the priests stuffed him into it, and his intestines exploded.
Oh, that's so gnarly, dude.
Yeah, so don't do liquid diets.
It's funny because
Kidding, don't do alcohol diets.
yeah, I thought liquid diet was just a fancy, dressed up way of saying I'm fasting with juice instead of water.
Well, yeah, I think today a lot of that is people say juicing, but like if you've got a surgery for example,
Yeah.
colonoscopy or something like that, they'll have you go on an all liquid diet, and I don't know what that means. I've never had to do a procedure that required that, but they're all liquid diets, and they'll have like nutrients and stuff mixed in, and that's interesting. Like, have you heard of Soylent?
Is that like the Huel?
I don't know what Huel is.
I think it's the same thing.
So Soylent was this guy. We'll talk about this a little bit more. I wrote down another list of things I don't want to cover, but
I'm so excited.
Soylent is basically a liquid that has all of the nutrients that you need to survive. And so in theory, you could just consume Soylent for the rest of your life and have the soul sucked out of you in doing so.
I knew a guy, and I don't know if it was Soylent or Huel, and I think Huel is basically the same premise. You don't have to do anything else other than just this. It has all the nutrients in it. But I feel like you'd have the potato syndrome all over again. 3 weeks in, and I'm like, fuck.
Yeah.
All I'm doing is just drinking this sludge, and
it reminds me of like,
ugh.
if you're eating black and white rainbows, like that's what it reminds me of.
You've tried this and it tastes like black and white rainbows?
No, I haven't tried it, but that's how I imagine it. Like there's no life to it. Like,
oh, that way. I was like,
rainbow has so much beauty, and food has so much beauty and flavor. Like,
I did not know what the fuck you were getting at. And I saw this like illuminated, like every other band. Like I imagined it. I was like, what the fuck? Is this like an Oreo flavored? What is this, Nick? I want to try this. No, totally missed that reference.
yeah. Oh, it was a made up reference. So it only makes sense in my mind. I'm glad you dove in deeper.
What other stories you got from what you found? Because that liquid diet one was killer.
Yeah, so I didn't capture a whole lot of stories, but I wrote down some blurbs about that. But on the other hand, like we talked about all of the different foods or liquids that people eat or drink. I don't even know how you label that, but anyway. Consume. There it is.
Got you.
I like it. And then on the other hand, you've got like anorexia would, in a way, kind of be grouped into like diets.
Yeah.
Like it's in its own class. It's different, but
It's like what you eat or don't eat in this case.
yeah, that's just a whole nother conversation. But yeah, I thought it was fascinating. Like all of these different diets, and it just begs us to ask, why so many diets that are opposed to one another?
I think it's just like camps of anything. Look at politics, man. You know, you've got right and left, and the people on either side of the fence really believe what they believe. And if you believe something, you think it's right. And then therefore, if it's right for you, we've got this thing ingrained in our minds that it's right for everyone if it's right for you. And I don't think that's always the case. I think one of the most beautiful things about humanity is that we have 1,000, however many billion different expressions and then therefore perspectives, and trying to condense that all into one expression or one perspective, I think is really sad. But I mean, I've been caught up doing it myself. Oh, nope, I figured out the right way to do it. You're wrong, fuck off, I'm right. And I think that's probably why you have the opposition of, I think it's probably coming from a good place. I have cracked the code on diet and I eat keto now and the rest of the world must do it with me too. Not picking on keto people, insert any diet. I think that's probably where it comes from.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And and they obviously work for people. Some do, some don't. And
Right.
people try different ones to kind of figure out what's right for you. And that seems to be the general consensus. I think we talked about this earlier, where it feels like a lot of diet comes down to trial and error.
Mm-hmm.
Like you just kind of have to, there are lots of different reasons that people choose a diet that's right for them.
Well, rewind 200 years, we didn't have a choice.
Yeah, you take the food that is bountiful and is presented before you.
And I think, as I was doing some of my research for this, talking about how like different microbiome stuff, which is a whole conversation in and of itself, but our whole bodies benefit and flourish from a varied diet. Well, that varied diet was almost forced by the seasonality of things. You couldn't get strawberries year round. You couldn't get sweet potatoes year round. You couldn't get even certain types of meat year round because it was only good to harvest in certain times of the year. Like, shit. That in and of itself forced us to have a balanced diet just naturally, just how the ecosystem provided it to us. Well, now with modern technology and preserving different things and, you know, the shipping lines that we have, we can get avocados year round. And now everyone's like, oh my God, avocado toast.
How do they go?
You can go back and rewind if you need to hear it again. I did my best basic roll. It's okay. I'm one on the inside too. But with all of that, I think you can literally just eat potatoes year round, avocados year round, Pop-Tarts, whatever the fuck you want, and your diet isn't balanced because you get into your routine of what's convenient. This is what I eat. This is what I like based on my palate, and you just repeat those same things, and then your diverse system is so not diverse because over time you're not giving it a diverse amount of shit to work with.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. And on the other hand, if you make a conscious effort, you can have a more varied diet because I'm getting kiwis, and kiwis definitely don't grow here to my knowledge.
Yeah, absolutely.
Avocados, you used that example already. And so it's kind of like you have the power to choose what you want your diet to consist of now. And if you have a simple palate or habits that you look for the same thing when you go to the grocery store, or maybe you're like me and you're not the best cook, and it's like, I'll tell you what, I know how to make steak, I know how to make salmon, I can do some chicken dishes, and then, I just repeat that cycle.
Yeah. Well, I think if you look at it in zoom way out, it's almost like the humanity evolving as a whole. When you're a kid, you're at home and you eat what's fucking put on your plate because you don't know how to get and make your own food anyway. You got to have whoever the fuck's taking care of you feed you. Well, then at some point you get to go have your own money or even figure out how to navigate the kitchen, and you can make and choose your own food. It was like humanity was kids and we just had to eat what was there. We didn't have a choice. And now I think we're seeing a lot of these people make bad choices or not know how to make the right choices. It's because we're not evolved enough to know where that adult level is, where it's just normal and we figured it out. We're in that discovery back and forth trying phase. And some people have figured it out, but I don't think as a whole or as a collective, we've figured out how to go, I balance these things and rotate these things out and have a very balanced diet that's good for me and not in excess.
Yeah, that makes sense. So it comes down to like self-control, making conscious effort, and and if you can master that and have discipline, then you can have a well-balanced diet and enjoy all the health benefits. And then there's all the other things, like if I think about people who go, like I'll go back to Atkins, I brought that up, or Weight Watchers, and they'll do like a point system. And so there are the people that want to lose weight and want to maintain like a certain figure. There are some people who have health problems. If it's diabetes, you can't have as much sugar, or you have to have sugar at certain points, and you just kind of keep that in check. People are lactose intolerant. In fact, I don't know if you know this.
That's so sad. Dairy is amazing.
Sad. I don't know if you know this, but really only people with European and some African descent have the enzymes to digest lactose in adulthood. And that's because, if you just believe the theory behind it, it's from the fact that there were cows and goats in those areas that were prominent. And if you consume the dairy and you're able to digest it well, then that's a whole nother calorie source. You just talked about you consume the calories that are there in front of you, and that's a great, dense, rich, nutritious source of food. If you're from an Asian country or like a Native American or something like that, you don't have those enzymes, and so you can eat dairy, but it's gonna fuck you up.
It's gonna Taco Bell you.
It's gonna consider yourself Taco Belled.
You said cheese, man, and I'm just imagining a tasty quesadilla right now.
Oh yeah, that sounds good.
I know, right? And I just totally threw you off topic.
We can always pause. We'll be right back. Kidding.
And now we're back with Taco Bell.
But seriously. I also thought, like, I wrote down for a cause. Specifically, veganism comes to mind. Like,
don't eat animals because we like the puppies.
That's right. You might be fine eating food and it might agree with you and it might be healthy, but you have a reason to abstain from eating animals. Talked about resource availability already with like what's presented before you. And you see that with like certain famines in the 1650s. There was a big famine and like 15% of the continent died from lack of nutrition and starvation and all that, but people ate the hell out of some potatoes. And the other one that I wrote down was kind of tongue-in-cheek, but time consumption. So the whole reason that Soylent came to be was that this engineer felt like making food took up too much of his time.
Don't get me wrong, I love cooking and I cook all the time. Especially now working at home, it's so much easier to take a break for lunch, and instead of driving across town to grab lunch with people, I just slide into my kitchen and whip up something. Mm-hmm. But damn, that time is right though. Like it does take time, and I don't mind the time cooking. I don't want to do dishes all the time.
Oh yeah,
like that's the part that sucks. Like I already have my reward. I've already eaten. I don't want to clean up. Fuck that noise. You know what? Soylent might not be so bad.
I'm going to start seeing Soylent come off the shelves. Where the hell do you even buy Soylent?
I assume because of the type of product it is, it's probably an online only thing. Mm-hmm. What grocery store would stock that shit? You're only going to buy this product and nothing else?
Probably the same kind of place that has black rainbows.
No, black and white rainbows.
Black and white rainbows.
If anybody knows what a black and white rainbow is, I want to know, or what it tastes like rather. I want to know.
It's got to be somewhere on the lines of you said Oreos and Lucky Charms.
Or it could be terrible, right? It could taste like black licorice and cottage cheese together.
Ooh.
See,
Ooh.
Exactly. Nobody wants.
That's a hard pass.
Yep. You're welcome.
Hey, it might be great. Somebody do a licorice and cottage cheese. Let me know how it goes.
Oh, please don't. Kids, don't do this at home.
So, man, like, we've been going for 30 minutes or so at this point, and it just reinforces how complex nutrition and dieting and food in general is.
Yeah, well, and I think, talking back to the availability we have now, we have so much, it gets so much more confusing. I remember back when I was homeless for a little bit and didn't have a ton of money, which typically happens when you're homeless. And so every time I'd go to the restaurant or shortly as I'm working my way out of there, I'd scan the menu for the cheapest shit, and that's what I'd get. Because, of course, that's what I can afford. Well, now I make good money, and I remember that transition out. I could afford anything on the menu. And it was so overwhelming because I was in the habit of not even looking at all of that. And so take the same perspective at all of this different food. You go in the grocery store and all these different veggies and all these different rows of soup and cereals and frozen shit. And
prime cuts of meat.
I don't know what the fuck what's healthy? Well, I know what I can go by what might taste good. And so from a consumer experiential standpoint, that's probably how most of it's marketed. This tastes good, or this looks appetizing, or we sell the little, it's organic, or healthier, or low fat, or high fat, or whatever to market to get people there. But does that marketing like fuck up our perspective of what actually stuff is because it's being pushed?
Yeah. And okay, so that's a good point. So like if you're talking about some of the marketing terms, like if you think organic chicken versus free range chicken, and I think there are a couple tiers in that list of what they mean, it's interesting because you would think that free range chicken would be a better, healthier chicken just conceptually because in theory, it might be a chicken with less anxiety when it was growing up. And we all know that when you have anxiety, you have different hormones that are being released. And
When I think free range chicken, I imagine a huge pasture with one chicken in it.
so if you look at the American FDA,
You're about to crush this, aren't
a
you?
free range chicken has to have 2 square feet per bird. So that's a chicken sized spot, basically.
So a free range Tony would have less space than this room.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
Damn, that's not free range.
And
That's
no,
solitary.
it's the opposite. It also has to have access to the outdoors with no definition of what that is. So is that a skylight? Check. Is there a chimney because somebody's got a fireplace on the other side of the building? And like, well, I don't know. The air kind of flows down when there's a downdraft.
Wow.
And then the same applies to organic. And I won't go through all of those different ones, but like organic has, to us, it means something as the consumer, but it has a definition to the FDA. And it may not always be what we think. And so,
The quick filter on organic is just, oh, it's organic, it's more expensive, it's healthier.
right. But is it?
But is it? And what am I actually paying for? Is there really a difference between the organic versus the non-organic?
Mm-hmm. That's right. And you'll pay, like another 30%. It's a premium product. And I get it as somebody who started a garden during the whole pandemic.
Hey.
You lose some crops to like bugs will eat it. And it's like, well, I'm not going to eat that leaf of kale because it looks like 4 caterpillars already did.
You grew kale?
I did grow kale.
Oh, that's awesome.
Dude, I fucking love my kale. That's actually my favorite plant that I've grown so far.
Really? I kind of just thought you grew jalapenos.
Oh, no. Oh, man, we got a whole garden. We're still booming. It's January right now in Tennessee, 30 degrees outside. We got spinach, arugula, kale, all still producing.
Damn.
It's good stuff, man.
Maybe I need to make a garden.
I enjoy it. It's a good excuse to get outside. But I can understand why you have to charge more for organic foods that you might not be using pesticides on to keep your crops from being eaten, especially if you've got like grains or something that mice are going to get into and real problems. And if you're a farmer and you're trying to make a living, you've got to get compensated for all of the produce that you're making.
So that 30% in theory could translate for the 30% less crop you have to offset what your base margins are.
Right. Or if some people use like, so we go back to chickens, you use like hormones to pump up the chickens and make them nice and fat and juicy. And if you go to the store, you're going to see a nice big chicken breast and it's non-organic. It's just a normal chicken breast
Right.
that people throw chemicals into to make nice and juicy. And the organic chicken may not be quite as succulent and large. And a perfect example is I just pulled some carrots up, and they are some dinky little carrots, man. Like, it's nothing like you get in the store. So I feel it.
Yeah, I mean, I want to look at some of the differences on what things were back in the day, a few hundred years ago versus like today. There's this one guy that I've been following on Instagram. If you want to go check him out, it's Dr. Stephen Lin. It's Dr. Stephen Lin. He's got some really interesting research that he's been doing, kind of in the dentist stuff and how diet relates to our teeth. And it's very interesting. Some stuff that I've been kind of looking at for the past couple of years. And it's not normal historically for humans to have crooked teeth. It's only been something that's happened in the past few hundred years. Dentistry is relatively new in the whole scope of things.
Or like orthodontics.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so if you just had a good diet, and so partially it was diet, but it was also the types of food they eat and how much they had to chew. Well, now all of our food is soft and processed. We don't have to chew as much, so our mouths don't expand and our teeth don't naturally straighten. And he followed a guy named Weston Price who spent years going into all of these remote populations that had beautiful white Hollywood beautiful straight teeth, no dentist practice, Nothing. They just naturally showed in that way.
And these are like Aboriginal tribes, people with little to no access to big cities and stuff like that.
Or Native American tribes, stuff like that. And he watched and studied as a lot of these different populations got introduced to a modern diet. Within a generation or two, their teeth started fucking up.
Isn't that fascinating?
And so it's a combination of, like, to distill it down, there's so much in this, but to distill it down, it's the diet that we eat, both in the nutritional quality of it, but also in it's so easy in process, so we don't have to chew it as much. And so that chewing strengthens the teeth, that resistance and that struggle. It's the same as like working out, right? That resistance, and the more you use it, the muscles and stuff build and move. But as you chew on certain things, your mouth would actually expand, especially in that formative ages of growing up, and your teeth would be able to come in straight.
And it makes sense. I had read something similar, and it may have been from the same person. I don't remember who it was, but your skull has, I think they're called sutures, the little cracks in your skull. Have you ever seen a skull and it's got like little lines in it?
Yeah, okay, I know what you're talking about.
I think it's called a suture, a cranial suture. It is. I just checked to make sure.
Thanks, Google.
Yeah, shout out to Google. Where's Larry Page? Killing it, man.
I said Google, now they're listening.
But you've got sutures all over your skull, not just around like the head part of your skull, but also around like your nose and your mouth. And the theory that I had read was that, going straight off of what you were talking about, the indigenous tribes, like the people who didn't have oatmeal and soft foods, tended to eat more sinewy foods. It would be less processed meats that you had to chew more, just like you said. It would be vegetables and roots that you really had to work in your mouth. And when you do that and you swallow those types of foods, your tongue, to swallow, pushes against the roof of your mouth to pull the food down your throat. And when your tongue does that, especially as a kid, and you've got those sutures that are more flexible in your skull, it moves your skull and broadens your mouth so that you have a wider mouth, because your tongue's constantly pushing against it every single time you swallow. And that just means that there's more space for your teeth to fit in there. They don't get as crowded. And now we've got these problems where even before you get your wisdom teeth in, your mouth is already so crowded, your jaw's narrower, and you get wisdom teeth come in, and then it just, it's like a train wreck in there, man. And so we're having to get them cut out and all of that.
What you described to me is such a beautiful human process that was there. As I'm a baby, I don't have teeth. I don't need them. Then as I start getting old enough to start using them, little baby teeth come in. But I'm probably going to need to start making room for the bigger teeth. Well, how does that happen? Just naturally by chewing and eating, something you're already going to do. There's this hidden process buried in there of, well, if you're going to make it this far, you need to eat. So as you continue to eat, you'll naturally make room. Those will fall out, and you'll continue to make room for the rest of them, and it'll work perfectly fine. Us being ignorant and unaware of that, don't know, and it's taken a few hundred years to realize that. It's just fucking fascinating to me.
Yeah, absolutely. It is, because like you can look at all of these orthodontics practices and be like, man, braces are expensive. Maybe it's, I don't think that it's fair to say that what we always historically ate is always the healthiest. It may be, but it also may not be. I don't really have any grounds to make that claim. But I do think that you can use that type of evidence to figure out what we used to eat,
right,
and understand that it was much less processed. It was those more sinewy foods that took a lot more processing in your mouth.
Well, and I think that's where the paleo diet that came from there, because it was supposed to be like
Meats
representative of Paleolithic times.
Yeah. And sure, maybe that is healthy. Like I think there's logic that makes sense that like if you go to what humans evolved to eat or historically ate, and that's been what kind of gave rise to humanity as a whole, then you can make that claim. But maybe you could say that carbohydrates help us in other ways.
Sure.
And that only came to be a staple from the agricultural revolution.
Yeah, and I know I've been kind of blasting modern diets and modern shit. I don't want to completely vilify all of it, right? Because I know for myself, I'll make this stupid drink. I used to, I think I talked about this on a different podcast. Maybe it was just a different conversation with somebody else. But growing up, my mom made us drink these like green drinks. And so I'd put, we hated them. Me and my brother would mix it in apple juice. It was some, I don't know, powdered greens. And so it was, without having to eat all the vegetables, you got a lot of the powdered good shit. So we went through all of these hoops to try to not have it. And then, fast forward 20 years and here I am myself making these pretty much every day with, a concoction of a bunch of different things. And so I think that wouldn't be as easily accessible to me without modernization. So having all of these awesome options for great, super healthy food is fucking fantastic. I think just the staple stuff that we have access to and the majority of stuff that's over processed or, well, let's put some sugar in it, then it'll sell.
Yeah, I was just about to mention that. So there are some, I was at my local grocery store, it was probably a year ago, and I was going through and I was like, kind of looked down at my shopping cart, and I tend to eat a pretty balanced diet. Like I try to get some vegetables and fruits, and I actually enjoy it. I mean, obviously I've got the garden going.
Right.
But I looked down and I was like, I got a lot of like just things that aren't what I would consider healthy. And so I went back through the vegetable section and I saw those little drinks that have, it's like your whole daily dose of vegetables. I was like, well, that's kind of interesting. I'll just try one of those. Seems healthy and whatnot. And I spun it around and it was like 30 grams of sugar, which is like a Pepsi. And I was like, oh my God, like that's not healthy at all. That's lying. Sure, it gives you your dose of vegetables, but it is so unhealthy to eat your vegetables that way.
It's better than a Pepsi, but it still comes at the cost of a Pepsi.
Yeah, that's a great way to describe it.
Like, ugh. That's...
And it all goes back to the marketing that you talked about.
Mm-hmm.
Another one that comes to mind is like Simply Lemonade or Simply Orange. All of those, it's branded to make you think like, okay, there's no nonsense in this. It's just orange juice. It's just lemonade, but it's got so much fucking sugar in it. Like it's smart of them. It sells and it tastes good.
It does taste good. I have some Simply apple juice in my fridge right now. Thank you very much.
Well, there you go.
But yeah, it's interesting on how, and those of us who take the time, or you and I both work in a version of sales or marketing stuff. So our eyes know to look for that or think through that. But until I worked in that field, I didn't fucking know about any of this shit or how marketing worked or how it might be kind of manipulative potentially.
Yeah, I was going to say we're always being subconsciously manipulated.
And I think that's why marketing has to, the only defining factor is intent. If you're just trying to sell your shit at anybody's expense, well, that's manipulative. Now, if it's just persuasive and it puts it in someone's face so they can make their own decision, but that's really fucking hard, fine line to do. And there's a lot of nuances and ethics, and that's a conversation for a different day. But yeah, it's hard to know what the fuck is going on with this food when not only do we not know about the food, we've got all of these different types of food, and then there's all of this marketing on food that we got to filter through. Shit.
And then you couple that with all of the controversy and back and forth about what nutrition is supposed to be for humans. It just adds fuel to the fire. And I think one of the challenges is that we look at nutritionists as experts that are supposed to help us. Mm-hmm. And I think they do. This isn't bashing on nutritionists at all. They have a really hard job.
Of course.
Because everything's very subjective. Like it goes back to only certain people are lactose tolerant. And the same, I'm sure, applies to a lot of other aspects of food. But yeah. I know that you'll read accounts of people who feel a lot better after going full vegetarianism or full vegetarian. And then you'll read some people who have tried that. It didn't they didn't feel good and they went all carnivore and they felt good from doing that. And so I think it just ultimately comes down to you as an individual. What's your genome and maybe even your environment?
Yeah.
It's just so complex. There are so many variables to consider.
Yeah, it's a maze.
Yes, it is.
Like, what in the actual fuck? I was reading this book or audiobook, listening to it on the way up here. I know we talked a little bit about it, but it's called Brain Maker. And it's talking about how in the last 10 years or so, they've just really discovered how there's actually almost its own ecosystem. They call it a microbiome in your gut. And it's so impactful and important that it could be almost its own organ. And it's not just, do these bacteria exist, but based on the different things you eat, the levels of the different types of bacteria exist. And so to get that right and to be the most beneficial, and again, they're just starting to discover and do research on this. And I think they said there's thousands or tens of thousands different types of bacteria that all need to be in certain levels of balance. And when one or several of them or different types of them get out of balance, that's when we see different types of disease and this, that, and the other. I'm like, what the fuck? Then you try to add that shit. Well, what food balances these 10,000 bacteria that I need for my health? And
on top of weight and all these other health concerns, it's complicated. What you said, Brain Maker was the name of that? I'm interested in that because I had read and I guess just been aware of like your gut bacteria and all of that. And one thing that I forget where I was even reading this, or maybe I was watching a video, but they had noted that some bacteria really thrive on sugars, for example. Mm-hmm. And so if you eat a lot of sugars, then those bacteria, which you need some of those bacteria,
right,
but they've got so much food. And what happens to a population of anything when it's got a lot of food? It reproduces, and ultimately it colonizes your stomach lining a lot more than all of the other bacteria. And so you get that unbalance. And then it's even more unsustainable because those, let's just use the sugar example again, those bacteria are taking up and almost have a monopoly on your stomach lining. And so there's nowhere else for the other bacteria to colonize, even when you change your diet and get more food. Over time, it changes and it'll rebalance, but it takes a lot of time to get there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's where it goes back to everything that I'm seeing is balance and moderation. And rotating through different things, because each different piece of I'm only a couple of chapters into the book, so we'll see what happens with it. But from what I'm gathering from there and other places, it's the more balanced and varied stuff you have feeds the different types of bacteria, and that way you don't get that, one type of bacteria trying to recreate the Roman Empire.
Yeah, go team. Get them.
Get them.
Another thing that I learned when I was researching gardening at the start of the year was all of the nutrients that are lost from shelving fruits and vegetables.
Yeah.
So if I don't have like numbers or specific data to quote here, but if you pick vegetables and fruits and consume them right after you pick them, fresh off the garden, not only does it taste better, in my opinion, but it has all of those nutrients. It hasn't, because the plant tries to use those nutrients to stay alive. Like if you cut off a leaf, it's going to do what it can to keep that individual leaf alive, and it's got some of the nutrients stored in there, and it's going to gradually consume them. And if you let it sit on a shelf, like we're so accustomed to going to a grocery store, that same process is happening. And then what do producers do? They add some additives to try to slow that process. They might coat your apples to keep them from rotting or losing any of its nutritional value. And then that's where you get some of these other chemicals that come in. And so like, I think for the most part, mass producers of food aren't trying to like poison us or anything like that. But because they're run like a business, they have profits to make. And if you lose 20% of your apples before they even get to the shelf because they're all rotting or whatever happens, right? Then they're going to, we can just give it a light coating of this and it keeps it fresh and it passes FDA regulations. Maybe because I slid my friend some money for his campaign so he could get reelected.
And he could make the FDA regulations.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so it's this whole system. So my big takeaway is that, like, if you can produce your own food, that's the best way to go. If you can go to a farmer's market and know who you're getting your food from and where it's coming from, that's a great solution. Or if you want to move to the middle of Malaysia and go to your friend who's got a little stand and he's selling papayas, it's probably a good spot to get some food.
No shit. Yeah, dude, I was unaware. I mean, it makes perfect sense, but when you're explaining the whole decay from pick to shelf, holy shit. From that moment that it's disconnected from its food source, it now needs to use its own. So it's almost like when you birth a baby and you cut that umbilical cord. Now it needs its own food source.
It's on its own.
But because we don't have a way to healthily feed vegetables or fruits in transit, we have to let it start to deteriorate itself. And every moment, it's getting less and less valuable. That's insane. Yep. So picking it, and then I got to pack it, and then it has to be whatever version of processed and stickered, and then put on a truck, and then shipped, and then unboxed, and then rolled out to whatever the floor, and then I got to pick it up.
It might sit there for 3 days.
And I take it home and sit it for another 2 days before I actually use it. Damn, I'm eating so much dead food.
Yeah, that's kind of what it comes down to. Yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it?
It really is.
And it's all this, like, kind of, all the things that we're not told or that we don't think about. Yeah, it's just too much.
Well, because you think about it and you go, well, I'm eating healthy. I'm eating the organic peppers instead of, I sprung for the organic produce. I'm eating healthy. Well, what if the organic produce was actually picked 2 days before the non-organic? And so the non-organic stuff that's sitting in front of you is actually more healthy in its current state.
Well, maybe the organic stuff doesn't have the pesticides, but it lost half of its nutritional value. It's like, it's a whole balance,
And they don't tell us that shit.
No, of course not. And they still charge you 30% more or whatever the premium is for your organics.
Well, clearly, do you have anything else to cover in this episode? I mean, I know there's a ton of food shit, but I think we're probably going to have to extend this into a couple more.
Yeah, I think so. And specifically, I mean, we glossed over some of the different, like, diets and why people do certain diets over others and all of that. Like, there's a lot to unpack here.
Yeah, I agree. So I think what we'll probably do is, so that we're not talking about food every week for the next month, maybe we'll just do an every other week. We'll do another food episode to try to, like, dive deep and dig deeper into this topic. And I think it'll give us some time to learn more about all these different diets and uncover more weird shit about food. Like, my bananas are not as cool as they were when they were picked.
Yeah, we're all going to be traveling. Got to drive down to Mexico, get my bananas, go up to Canada to get my seal meat.
I was like, yeah, what do you get from Canada? Do people eat moose?
Oh yeah.
Have you had moose?
No, but I want to. I've heard it's fantastic.
Have you had elk? I feel like that's the next.
I've also heard that's fantastic.
You've not
My
had
girlfriend gets some elk, and she's had venison and elk, and she was like, venison's good. Elk is a whole nother world. So I'd love to go do an elk hunt or something and just try it. Or if somebody's got some elk or something, I'd love to buy some. You can't, I may have told you this already, but you can't buy venison in Tennessee.
That doesn't surprise me.
And it makes sense, so that, like, otherwise you'd go out and just overhunt all of the deer. But then you could still have they still have a cap on how many deer you can take every year. So yeah, I guess I just don't understand that then.
Have you ever eaten any like endangered or like sketchy meat, like a rhino or something?
No, you got some rhino horn powder or something?
Nah, bro.
No, I've had, like, kangaroo and ostrich, but nothing that was endangered.
Kangaroo. I feel like that would just be chewy as fuck.
It was jerky, so it tasted like beef jerky.
Okay. Yeah.
But over there in Australia, they're viewed like deer. Like, they can be, they're like pseudo pests. Like, deer, in my mind, aren't pests, but part of the conservation behind it is that they eat a lot of crops and all of that. And so they try to maintain the population, and they will overpopulate, and that causes problems in and among the deer themselves because they're not getting enough food and all of that.
Right.
But I had only considered like hitting it with your car or something like that. It's a problem if there are too many deer. But it's the same problem with kangaroo. They'll just sprint across the road, and they're everywhere in Australia. And so they cause a lot of car wrecks. They tear up people's yards and all of that stuff. And so it's like, get them, eat them.
We're going way off topic, but do Australians have zoos? It's probably really...
Yeah. Steve Irwin, man.
Okay, but do they have deer in their zoo?
Oh.
Because we've got kangaroo in ours. And if you just equated kangaroo and deer, I wonder if they've got like, and this is the North American deer.
Huh. I don't know. That's a great question.
Because I know we'd never have deer in a zoo. Like, why the fuck would we do that? They're all over everywhere. You don't need to go to a zoo to see it.
Can we just tag Bindi Irwin in this? And hey, does Australia Zoo have some deer?
I mean, probably a quick Google search would figure out, but that's not as fun.
Yeah, why do that when you can talk to Bindi?
Awesome. Well, thanks for tuning in for our first discussion on food, everybody. We'll obviously have, I think I've got a couple ideas on how we can make this interesting over the next couple of weeks and kind of check out some of these diets.
Yeah, a lot of topics come to mind, and just don't quote me on these because we'll have to plan these episodes shortly after this, but I'm thinking like organic and non-organic or GMO.
What if we do a bunch of like head-to-head shit?
Yeah. So, what do you mean?
Like we cue it up like it's a fight, like organic versus GMO, vegan versus carnivore.
And you don't have to come to a conclusion. Maybe you do.
Yeah.
Survival of the fittest.
I dig this. Well, stay tuned. We're gonna have you choose the winner type discussions on food. Stay tuned.
Can't wait.